you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
could you tell us your first name?
Akashua.
What were your dreams as a kid?
Um, to become a doctor, actually. I taught myself how to read around I guess before the age of 5. And I remember reading a book called Mommy's at Work. And I remember just sitting on my stomach and I saw this picture of this mother who was also a doctor. I had no desire to be a mother, but I wanted to be a doctor. So that was where it started.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure, why not? So I lost my father to lung cancer around the age of 11 months, and it was always just myself and my mother. Things were very good, normal in however you define it, before the age of 10. Well, I mean, around the age of 10, things changed. And I witnessed my mother's second suicide attempt, her second murder attempt on me. And that was kind of our end of our relationship
How old were you?
around the age of 10, 9 or 10.
How what? That's what happened.
Um,
If you want to talk about
no, it's fine. It's amazing what you still remember. It was a Saturday night. I remember that. I was on the couch because Showtime of the Apollo was on. And all of a sudden, my mother called out my father's name, Nana. And I had never heard her call his name before. And then I remember her in the hall with two handfuls of her psychiatric pills, begging me to take those pills with her because she was tired. She was over it. Um, and of course, I didn't take them, but it was a very long night for me, and I remember a lot of things that happened um, during that night. And I remember contacting my grandmother, and we did take my mother to the hospital, but that was kind of it kind of reminds me of that song almost by Don Henley, The End of the Innocence. And that's kind of what it was. Um, I, unfortunately, and ironically enough, it is Mental Health Month, right? So, but in our family, we didn't talk about mental illness. Um, it didn't exist for some reason. It was like, well, yeah, it does. But, you know, it was one of those things where if you don't understand something, then it doesn't exist. That's kind of how it went in my family. So I went to school the following week, and no one in my family asked me, how are you? Do you want to talk about it? What can we do? Do you want to cry? That's another thing. You don't cry. But I remember the following day, I disassociated. And I remember that was what it was, because I remember what it felt like. I didn't have the language for it, but I remember just being on the playground and just feeling like I'm outside of myself, but I'm watching myself do something. And that was kind of the beginning of just, I want to say the beginning of the end and the beginning of something else. And I'm still working towards. And I guess that's my hope as a now 41-year-old, to talk openly about things that as a 10-year-old I could not talk about because I didn't have the language for it. I didn't have anyone that would allow me to talk about it. So this is kind of my way as, I guess, an elder to say, you know what, we're going to talk about this. We're going to put language to it. We're going to take these things out of the shadows. We're going to take these things out of, oh, we don't talk about that. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. So.
What was that second part of you, briefly?
Of disassociating?
Yeah.
It felt so strange. Like when it happens, especially to you as a child, you don't have that language, right? Like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm disassociating. No, you're just you're doing something you have no control over. And it didn't take me until decades later to be like, oh, that's what I was doing because I had to. That was like my brain protecting itself because they didn't know what else to do.
What was your relationship with your dad like, and how did that feel?
I lost him when I was 11 months, so we didn't have a relationship. What I know of him was from whatever my mother or grandmother may have said. That he was a very kind man, that he immigrated here from Ghana. That he loved my mother. But I'm sure that he had no idea what to do with her, you know. And I'm just now allowing myself to also process his death and what that has meant for me. Because it's always been easier for me to write about and talk about my mother. But I realized very late in life, I was like, I there are some father wounds that I need to address. And so I'm starting to do that as of late. And it's actually a lot more difficult than it is to talk about my mother, because I can just, blab on about her. But it's hard to talk about someone who was never there.
How did that lack of a relationship, that absence, feel briefly?
I was always, I was told very young that he's just not here, that he passed away. So it wasn't like anyone hid that information from me. And I just sort of took it, even as a kid, like, it is what it is, I have no memories of me crying over him or anything. I would always, funny enough, I would always say to myself that my two parents were not my mother and my father, but my mother and my grandmother. And when I started to go deeper into my therapy, I realized that they too had their own father wounds. They too had their issues with their fathers abandoning them. Even though my father didn't really abandon me, he just passed away, But they also had that lineage going on in their lives. So.
What about your relationship with your mom and how that relationship felt for you?
We don't have a relationship, and I'm okay with that. I have been estranged from my mother for a little over 15 years. As far as I know, she's still alive, but and she actually will be approaching 70 in 2 years, which is very strange for me. I sometimes joke with my therapist, the women in my family, it takes a long time to kill us. As much as we hate each other, as much as we hate our lives, we manage to just live to 70 and 80. It's like, eh. But, we don't have a relationship, and I accept that. Does it hurt? Yes. It still hurts. Even to this day, it does hurt. It hurts differently. If you would have asked me how it hurts as a 10-year-old, I wouldn't know what to say. Because I wouldn't know how to like, explain that to you. But as a 41-year-old, it's like, yeah, it hurts. It hurts differently, but I'm not going back. I can't.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest thing you learned from your parents, good or bad?
Well, um, so this sounds odd, but I will give respect to one, maybe two things about my mother and my grandmother. It's because of them that I fell in love with music and literature. My mother used to be an English major at one point, and but music was like my best friend, and there was always a song that was like a soundtrack to my life, like it was a soundtrack to their lives, and like with my grandmother, she put me on Mahalia Jackson and the Five Blind Boys of Alabama. And my mother, it was always the Beatles and the Stones and Michael Jackson. And my first album was Like a Virgin. And, it was like there was always music in my home, because that was like my extended family. I could turn to the radio, I could turn to my cassettes, I could turn to my CDs, and that would keep me going. As far as another good thing, well, maybe neither good nor bad, but just I learned how to survive. And that put me in the position of having to be hyper independent, which may have kept me alive up to this point, but it also created a lot of trust issues for me. So, it's like, was that a good thing to become hyper independent, self sufficient? I guess. But if you don't trust anyone, if you don't feel like anyone has your best interest, you're also going against yourself in the end. So, still working on that, because that is definitely hard.
Can you tell us about your first love and how that felt? And you may have brushed on it already, but it's whatever you associate as your first love. It can be a person, place, or thing. Just that first, like, man, this is it.
As far as a place, I would actually say Santa Fe, New Mexico, because that was the first time where I actually left when I left Dallas. And I had no idea what to really expect other than, the tourist pamphlets. But when I first arrived, it was like in the middle of February, which is like not the ideal time. But it was just so gorgeous. Like if you've ever been to Santa Fe, like it's just so gorgeous and magical. And I'm a sucker for architecture. And it looked nothing like Dallas. It was just so beautiful. And I was like, people actually live here? Like, it's just, rich white people, but, seriously. But it was just beautiful. And I had never felt like I could live somewhere where there was that much beauty,
Can you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak? And it's the same thing, whatever you associate with those words and how that felt.
Um, I guess my greatest loss was the loss of my entire family. And just, the realization, like the constant realization that this is like, yeah, we're related by blood, but um, there's no love between us. And to realize that, like somewhere in your gut, like I can't trust these motherfuckers. That is a strange feeling, you know? And it's hard to explain to other people when they say, oh, but that's your mother, but that's, it's like, no, no.
So can you describe that feeling when you're like, man, it's almost like being alone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different abandonment. Um, it's like you have the abandonment where, you know, people talk about the father going for a pack of cigarettes and you don't hear from him for 30 years, right? But then there's a different abandonment where you physically see that person every single day, but they don't acknowledge you. And there were actually a lot of times where I was like in my home with her, I would start to question, am I here? Am I alive? Because it's like there's, like, I know she sees me, but, nothing's going on. And you start to wonder if you even exist. That's when it's really kind of fucked up, you know? Because she's not gone, not physically. You see her every day, but there's nothing. There's nothing going on with her. So
How'd that feel as a kid?
I don't know if I even have the words to explain that level of loss because it's not a singular loss. It's a consistent, it's not like a one moment of, oh, your mother abandoned you. It's like, no, this has been going on for decades. And it's not just one person either. When it's an entire family and you realize that and you keep realizing that, and it's like, what the hell? What did I do? Like, why am I not good enough?
Who would you say first taught you what love is and how?
I don't know if anyone taught me. Um, I think I've been given a lot of lessons as far as what it's not, but as far as what it is, like, you know,
What's
beats
your
me.
definition of love?
Um, there's no love without safety. If I can't be safe with you, if 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 I have to protect myself from you, then there's no love. There's no possibility. I need to have that safety, and I need to be able to trust you, and those things are earned, you know. And it doesn't really matter to me how many times you say, "Oh, you can trust me. Oh, I'm your, whatever." And it's like you have to show me, and I have to feel it within my gut, you know. Um, so there has to be trust. There has to be safety. There has to be concern for each other's well-being. There has to be reciprocity going on. Shit can't just be one-sided. Like I'm just pouring into you. I'm just pouring into you, but you're leaving me empty. That isn't love either.
What's a good day look like for you?
Um, hmm. I guess, any day that I can peel myself out of bed and make myself a cup of coffee, or, you know, I'm not like too involved in my head with like, bad memories, um, or my anxiety is, at a decent level where I can still manage it. Uh, I can still like either clean my apartment or make breakfast or, Zoom meetings or, just stay productive. Um, I guess that's kind of a good day for me. You know, I understand that the bar is kind of low, compared to others, but it's like, I'm not suicidal today. So and I haven't killed anybody. So, yeah.
That's a good day.
Shit.
So the flip side of that, what's a bad day look like, and how do you? What are some of the things you do to
Oh
just
man.
go through those bad days or challenging days?
30 years of bad days. Well, I guess when I just really, really can't stand my own existence. Like when I'm just so in my head, and I'm usually like 90% in my head all day. But when I just go into those really dark, horrible places that I just can't. And that's the thing about, severe depression and, especially PTSD. Like, you think you're still there, even though logically it's like, nope, I'm at home, I'm not where I was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but your brain is like, nope, we're going back to age 10. I was like, no, I don't want to. I just want to drink my damn coffee, you know? And like it can get so bad where I know that I'm in trouble. But that's the thing, like since we're talking about, mental health and everything, a lot of times you know that you're in trouble, like mentally, but you haven't done anything, like any self harm, you haven't made any threats, Um, but a lot of times, even getting help, even asking for support, my experience with that is a lot of times they don't take you seriously unless you do something, unless you threaten to do something. I can't tell you how many times I've had to call the cops on my mother and be like, y'all need to come here. She's, acting up. She's like, her life is in danger. My life is in danger. And they're just like, she hasn't done anything, so we don't care. And then they leave. I'm like, what is she supposed to do? And that's another thing that has always angered me because it's kind of like people wait until you do something before they take it seriously. Um, like the mental institutions, until you show up with, an AK or, or you smear yourself with your own shit or something before they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll take care of you. I'm like, I had to go through all of that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's say yes too to the help, right? Like, so there's that where, I've dealt with mental health issues within my own family, within myself.
Right, right.
It's like, you shouldn't have to wait to that, but then they want they want us to be like, yeah, I need that help too, you know what I mean? And say like, because if you go to those places and you don't say the right answers,
Yeah. And
how do we get people to say yes to the help?
I think I think a lot of people do want the help. Um, it kind of depends on a few things. Like, do you trust the help?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I've dealt with different therapists since college. And one of the things that I've always had to be aware of is I have to still be careful what I say, right? Even calling the crisis hotline, you know, you don't want to say the wrong thing
Mm-hmm.
and then have, a team of armed cops
Yeah.
bum rushing you, shooting you 30 times. For what? Because I said that, I have no hope, that I'm tired.
Mm.
Come on now. So it's like, yeah, there are people who don't want the help. Sure, there are people who do want the help, but because the help is so conditional, there's so many things that person has to kind of jump through to receive that help. You have to be able to afford it. You have to have insurance. You have to be able to afford the copay. You know, maybe you have to wait 6 months or a year to see a psychiatrist or a therapist. Maybe that therapist is in a different part of town that you've never been to. So until we look at those things, then getting help is not going to be anywhere as easy as it should be.
Yeah, it's got to be compassionate help. That is huge. Is the trust. Like, you want to trust where you let somebody know and you don't want to be put in a straitjacket. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
And I've seen my mother in a straitjacket,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things. I mean, I just dealt with something with a family member, and I'll talk about it after.
Yes, that's fine.
What's a person? Excuse me, I digress. What's
Sure.
a person, place, or an event that's shaped you, good or bad?
So I would say all three. My person, place, event that gave me my first sense of community was when I was a student at University of New Mexico, and I would go every month in the community, and they would have their open mic poetry events. And that was like my first sense of like belonging and feeling like I could trust others with my work, and there wasn't going to be that judgment. And that was just so affirming for me. And I think one of my good friends, she still lives in Albuquerque, Andrea Serrano, who I just love and adore. because she put those events together. Uh, person, place, or event. Another thing that actually kept me together was I had a weekly dance class at the university, and it was that was just so like I'm not a professional dancer by any means, but being able to surround myself with just all of these beautiful people who were also not professional dancers, but they were just dancing with their hearts, and there were a lot of times where I would just be just so overcome with emotion. I would just break down, or I just couldn't move, or I would just move like no one was watching, and it was like, this is me when I'm unguarded. This is me when I feel safe. And I miss those feelings. I do.
What inspires you?
Um, hmm. That little girl who had absolutely nothing and no one, and lived in constant terror, and was always told that she was not good enough. She inspires me. She she inspires me. All of those broken girls and broken young women that I had to be to get to where I am today. I'm here because of them.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
Um, well, I've experienced homelessness more than once in 3 states, despite going to college and pursuing the American dream. Um, I think, I actually just thought about this, and I posted something similar on my Facebook because I was thinking a lot about the rising cost that just continues to go up, and I was posing one of the questions I was posing was, I guess if you've never experienced having an eviction notice on your door, then you're probably not going to understand how quickly you can lose everything. And that is always so much quicker to lose everything than it is to rebuild. No matter how smart you are, no matter how good you look, no matter how many friends you have, no matter how much money you have, you know, your landlord does not care about you. Your landlord can raise your rent $100 or $1,000. Like, you know, and I have yet to meet anyone that has 6 months of savings where if anything happened to them, illness, accident, job loss, whatever, they have at least 6 months that they know I'm good. Not even. And yet we think that, the homeless are our enemy. They're not. You think that homeless person is your enemy because you're literally one paycheck from being them.
scary.
Yeah.
How did that humble you? What was the inner workings of that humbling process? I mean, you touched on it, but what happened inside, like,
Um, when I found myself homeless here in Denver, I was also not in a good mental space. I was experiencing um, some bouts of psychosis, if you will. And I had no sense, very little sense of reality. And you know that is so hard to explain to people what that is like when you're on the streets and you're already not safe and you're already, you're vulnerable, and you don't know what's going on, and you can't control what's going on in your head, and it's like, who am I supposed to talk to and say, I'm hurting, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what's going on. I have a lot of memories of me just having to walk myself to the hospital at night for to be seen in a psychiatric ward. Like, somehow I still had that little, you know, to just, I knew where the hospital was.
what's the lesson from that humbling?
It can happen again.
Hmm.
It can.
That's the part of it, yeah. That's the
Yeah.
humility, yeah. Because
Yeah, it can. And I one thing that I have a couple of gripes.
yeah,
Um, I know that the whole it gets better, people love to say that.
yeah.
It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It doesn't. It gets different.
Hmm.
If you would have told me as a 10-year-old, it gets better, I'd be like, oh, okay. But if maybe that was a good thing that nobody told me at 10 years old that I would have gotten better, because I would have been very pissed.
Hmm.
Because I would have been like, y'all lied to me for 30 some years about it getting better, and it didn't. It just got different.
Mm-hmm.
With, changes of medication. I remember when I was a full time student at UNM and I had a campus psychiatrist. I was probably put on a different set of medication every other semester. I don't even remember what the fuck I was put on, you know? But it got different. Circumstances got different. A different therapist, the support of other survivors, um, creative pursuits, a decent therapist and psychiatrist. It got different. It didn't get better.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why people want to, say that, because number one is a profitable, slogan in the mental health um, world, but it's very deceitful, you know. And if you're going to tell somebody it gets better, you also need to tell them when it gets better and how it gets better. because it gets better means nothing. It's kind of somebody just patting you on the head, going, "Oh, there," you know.
Go in your mind and think. This life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war?
Hmm. Um, as someone who has lived with severe depression, anxiety, among other things, I feel like I've been at war with myself since middle school. And I've also been at war with my mother. Um, there were particular events where that war almost led to either myself losing my life or her losing her life or both of us. Because that's how wars are, you know. But most of my life, I've been at war with myself. And maybe the war looks differently compared to back then, compared to maybe 20 years ago. But, or maybe I've just changed my weapons.
How do you how do you go through that war in I guess the best way you can? How'd you do it then and how do you do it now?
Um, I guess you get used to so many things. Like, I don't have much memory of a time when I wasn't severely depressed, like this is probably the longest time where in my life that I remember where I wasn't suicidal. Um, does that mean that the war for me has ended? No. It just means I'm in a different place. The depression is still there, the PTSD is still there, the anxiety is still there. But I don't know. It's just, I guess, when, as you were talking, we were asking the question about, war. Um, I forgot to mention, I come from a family of veterans. And I sometimes joke with my therapist that I had two childhood homes. My primary childhood home and the VA hospital, fourth floor psychiatric facility in South Dallas.
Mm.
Those were my two homes. Um, I don't know how to put down my weapons, even when I'm going against myself.
So for the next question, same type of question. If you can go in your mind and think this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual, can you tell us about a time in your life that you can relate to the word peace?
Yes. Um, I take great joy in being able to do simple things. The fact that I get to live alone in my apartment, I get to wake up every morning, and one of the first things that I do is make myself a cup of coffee. And it seems so silly, but it's like to be able to do something so simple, and it's like nobody's coming after me, nobody's yelling at me, I'm not putting up with anybody's stuff. Like, I'm just gonna make my coffee, and it's gonna be okay another day.
Can you tell us about a truly difficult time in your life, how it felt, how you endured?
Well, we'll be here for several days, but the first thought, so when I was a student at the University of New Mexico, I was not doing well at all. And I remember one Friday night, I was in my studio apartment, and I have a tendency to listen to songs on repeat. And I was listening to the song Head Down by Audioslave on repeat. And it was completely dark with the exception of a blue light in my apartment. And all of a sudden, as the song was playing, I could envision both my mother and myself hanging from the ceiling. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I knew there were knives in my kitchen. And it was such a long night for me. It was like, you know how people talk about going through the dark night of the soul? Well, that was it. And that night ended. I didn't call for help, unfortunately. And I sometimes laugh about how that night ended for me, because I was just sitting in my bathtub, and the only thing, because I have such a random brain, the only thing I could think of was the famous quote by Winston Churchill: "When you're going through hell, keep going." And as I was thinking, I was like, why am I thinking about Winston Churchill? Should I be researching things on World War II again? that's how my brain goes. And it's like, oh, okay, I gotta do something. I gotta do something. But that was such a hard ass night, where I was like by the skin of my teeth. Like I really almost did not make it. I really didn't. And, you know, I was having my own thing. I guess it was just the meds were, you know, not that great. I can't even tell you what I was on specifically, because I was on so many things. But, you know, it was just such a terrible, scary night for me. I was so afraid of myself. I was like, I don't know how to get myself out of this. But I guess I did.
How'd it feel?
Incredibly draining. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel content. I didn't feel any of the good feelings. I just felt like physically and emotionally drained. And oddly enough, that following week, I did end up going to class. It was a positive psychology class of all classes. It's like, talk about, you know, class just completely failing you failing it or whatever. But I did tell my professor. I remember I was like, I'm not doing good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. Like, I don't know what I need. And sometimes that's it also. Like, sometimes you don't know what you need,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to do something. And if you have already asked for help and have been denied, then at some point you're going to stop asking, right? Even when things are getting worse. So, unless someone is showing you that, hey, you can trust us, you can trust this organization, you can trust this doctor, you can trust these things, and this is how I know, then, you're going to be looking at everyone like, no, I can't. No, I can't. And I wouldn't say that, my own relationship with the mental health system has been anywhere as tragic as my mother's. Um, Maybe I'm lying to myself, because it certainly hasn't been great. But, you know, I feel like I have had some decent specialists in my life so far.
Can you tell us about a truly joyous moment in your life and how that felt? The closest thing to it.
Um, Normally, when I feel safe enough to write or to dance or to share my poetry or to even, have do something as simple as have a conversation with someone and just listen to them. That brings me joy.
What keeps you up at night?
My stupid brain, very, very stupid brain, probably YouTube. Should probably like not, you know, be watching documentaries on serial killers and missing persons at 3 in the morning, but I gotta go to sleep at some point. That kind of helps me.
What keeps you going every day?
Spite for others in my past. But no, there's so much more that I want. Like, I feel like, it's time. It's been time. Like, you know, I want, and I have this conversation with my good friend who is also in Denver. And we're like, we need to go for rich auntie vibes from here on out. Like, fuck poverty. We need to be in a spa every single day. We need to be at the chiropractor. We need to, fine dining, like all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like whatever it takes,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't be doing this, you know, um, and just growing old. Like, nah.
That's a little bit of hope, right?
Especially the spite part.
We all need some to light the fire under that. Works.
Yeah.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
Um, I really try to not have too many regrets because I try to understand that wherever I was at that time and whoever I was, I did what I had to do with what I knew. But if the regrets are still there, I probably should have left home a lot sooner. I probably should have taken a lot bigger chances on myself. I probably should have um, walked away from a lot of like situations that were clearly toxic, and where I felt like there was just nothing but disrespect. I probably should have let go of a lot of people, you know, that clearly were showing who they were. And I just didn't want to see it. So,
So you're alive and well. Do you feel that you can be at peace with any of those regrets you just mentioned or make amends? And
um, kind of like I have to keep, reminding myself like who I was back then didn't have the understanding that I have now, didn't have the support that I have now. And instead of me, going against myself and being like, oh, you should have done this, you should have, made these decisions. It's like, meet yourself with self compassion. You know, the way that if your friend told you like, oh, I screwed up, I'm a loser, I'm this, I'm that, like, you want to be the one that says, no, 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 no. You did what you had to do. It was right for that moment. You know differently now. And that's the thing, you know differently now. And you take the wisdom that you have and you give it to someone else who's going through it, who's confused, who doesn't have that support. So maybe that's probably why I'm still here.
tell me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
Um, I would like to think that I can take everything that I've gone through and basically be like that wise person that I didn't have growing up. Someone who's non judgmental, but who's also like, I see where you're going because I've been there, and I want you to understand something. I want you to open your perspective, whether it's about, your toxic family or about living in poverty or mental illness or homelessness or, going back to school or whatever. Maybe this perspective can help you.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your picture perfect ending? And it's not the end. It's as if your life was a book or a movie. What's that like scenic last shot almost?
Um, Ideally, like if I can, have this small little cabin in the woods with, just myself and taking care of a couple of like senior dogs, and I've already released my books into the world, and critical acclaim, and you know that's going super well for me, and the opportunities from that are just coming in, and I'm able to like speak more, and share more of my thoughts with people, but to just live authentically. And that's the goal.